Ah, so you thought they wouldn't notice. You thought you could just slip back into the room, into their feeds, into their consciousness, wearing a completely different energy, and nobody would feel the shift in the atmosphere. But here's what actually happened. The moment you walked in, the temperature dropped, the air got thicker, conversation stuttered, and every single person who thought they had you figured out suddenly realized they were staring at a stranger. A stranger with your face, your name, your history, but absolutely none of the weakness they remembered, none of the desperation they fed on, none of the predictability they banked on. You showed up different, and it broke something in their reality that they can't fix, can't explain, can't ignore. Let me paint you the picture of what just happened in their minds. For months, maybe years, they had you cataloged, filed away in a neat little box, labeled, handled, predictable, controllable, broken, maybe even defeated. They knew your patterns, your reactions, your triggers, your limits. They could almost script your responses before you opened your mouth. You were the constant in their equation, the variable they never worried about because you always equaled the same result. And that gave them comfort, power, a sense of superiority that they wore like armor. But then you disappeared. Not physically maybe, but energetically you withdrew. You went silent. You stopped feeding the machine. You stopped playing the game. And they genuinely believed that your absence meant you were somewhere licking your wounds, nursing your damage, maybe even regretting who you were or what you did. But that's not what happened at all. While they were busy celebrating your exit, you were in the shadows doing something they couldn't comprehend. You were shedding every single layer of who you used to be. Not because you were broken, but because you finally realized you were wearing a costume designed by their expectations, their judgments, their limitations. You were performing in a play you never auditioned for, reading lines written by people who didn't even respect the story. So, you stopped. You walked off stage mid-scene, and instead of collapsing like they predicted, you found yourself the real you. The untamed, unfiltered, unapologetic version they never got to meet because you were too busy trying to be digestible, acceptable, understandable. And when that version finished cooking, when you finally stepped back into the light, you didn't come back to explain yourself or prove anything. You came back because you were ready. And that readiness radiated off you like heat off asphalt in summer. Now, let's talk about the exact moment they saw you. Maybe it was a photo. Maybe it was a story. Maybe you walked into a room. Maybe you posted something that landed on their screen. Whatever it was, it hit them like a freight train made of confusion and envy. Their first reaction wasn't admiration. It was defense. It was disbelief. It was denial. "Who do they think they are?" they muttered. "This is fake," they whispered. "They're trying too hard," they convinced themselves. Because accepting that you genuinely evolved, that you actually transformed without their permission or participation would mean admitting they were wrong about you, wrong about themselves, wrong about the entire dynamic they thought they controlled. And nobody, absolutely nobody, wants to admit they lost control of a narrative they thought they owned. Especially when the person they underestimated is now the one writing the sequel. Here's where it gets beautiful, though. You didn't change for them. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to become someone else to spite them or prove them wrong or win them back. That's what they can't wrap their heads around. They're so used to people performing, posturing, pretending for validation, for attention, for approval that when someone transforms authentically, it looks like witchcraft. It looks impossible. You changed because you got tired of betraying yourself. You changed because staying the same started costing more than growth ever could. You changed because silence taught you more than their voices ever did. Because solitude showed you more than their presence ever revealed. You changed because you finally chose yourself with the same intensity you used to choose. Keeping the peace, maintaining the connection, preserving the illusion. And that choice, that singular decision to prioritize your evolution over their comfort, rewired everything. Let me tell you what's happening in their group chats right now. They're analyzing you like you're a crime scene. Did you see them? Something's off. They're different. I don't know what it is, but it's weird. They're trading screenshots, dissecting captions, reading between lines that don't even exist because they're desperate to find the crack, the flaw, the proof that this transformation isn't real. They need it to be temporary, a phase, a mask. Because if it's permanent, if it's genuine, then they lost something they can't get back. Not you. They lost that the moment they chose to underestimate you. But they lost their sense of superiority, their feeling of control, their ability to predict and therefore manipulate. You became the unpredictable element in their otherwise stale equation. And unpredictability is the enemy of people who need to feel like they're always 10 steps ahead. And here's the part that's eating them alive. You're not explaining yourself. You're not writing long posts about your journey. You're not giving them the satisfaction of a breakdown or a breakthrough speech. You're not performing your transformation for their consumption. You just are. You exist in this new frequency without needing their validation or understanding. And that silence is louder than any monologue you could deliver. Because silence forces them to sit with their own thoughts, their own doubts, their own realizations. It forces them to question everything they thought they knew. Not just about you, but about themselves. If they could change that much without us noticing, what else are we blind to? If they didn't need us to become that, what did they ever need us for? These questions are haunting them in ways they'll never admit out loud. You want to know the real psychological warfare you're unleashing right now. It's not that you became better, prettier, richer, stronger. Although maybe you did become all those things. The real weapon is that you became unavailable. Not just physically or romantically or socially unavailable, but emotionally, energetically, mentally unavailable to their narratives, their judgments, their projections. You're no longer a character in their story. You're not the villain they needed to justify their victimhood. You're not the victim they needed to feel powerful. You're not the supporting role they needed to feel like the main character. You removed yourself from their script entirely and started writing your own. And that removal created a void they can't fill with anyone or anything else because you weren't just another person in their life. You were the mirror that showed them who they really were. And now that mirror is gone. They're left staring at walls wondering why they suddenly look so empty. Let's get into the specifics of what they're seeing now. When they look at you, they're seeing confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. They're seeing peace that doesn't need to perform itself. They're seeing boundaries that don't need to explain themselves. They're seeing someone who walks into rooms without scanning for approval, who speaks without waiting for validation, who exists without needing permission. And all of this, every single element of this new you, is completely foreign to the person they remember. The person they remember apologized for existing, shrunk to make others comfortable, dimmed their lights so others wouldn't feel outshined, carried guilt that wasn't theirs, shouldered blame they didn't earn. That person is dead, and you're standing on that grave wearing flowers they could never grow. Now, here's where we need to address the elephant in the room. The guilt they're trying to make you feel for changing. Oh, they're trying. You're not the same person anymore. They'll say, and they'll say it like it's an accusation, like consistency with who you used to be is somehow more valuable than growth into who you're meant to be. They'll call you fake, phony, a persona, anything to discredit your transformation because accepting it would mean accepting their failure to break you, to keep you small, to maintain the upper hand. They need you to be the villain in your own story so they don't have to be the villain in yours. But here's your response. Silence. Not because you're scared. Not because you're guilty, but because people who are committed to misunderstanding you don't deserve the energy it takes to be understood. Let them build their theories. Let them craft their narratives. Let them twist your growth into whatever story helps them sleep at night. Meanwhile, you'll be busy actually living, actually growing, actually thriving in ways they can analyze but never replicate. And can we talk about how they're suddenly interested again? Funny how that works, isn't it? When you were available, accessible, predictable, they barely looked your way. They took you for granted like oxygen. Necessary but unremarkable. But now that you're different, now that you're unavailable, now that you're clearly thriving without them, suddenly they're sliding back in. Suddenly they're watching your stories first. Suddenly they're liking old posts. Suddenly they're mentioning you in conversations. Suddenly they're asking mutual friends about you. This isn't love. This isn't regret. This is ego. Their ego can't handle that you evolved without them, that you became someone worth paying attention to after they stopped paying attention. They're not coming back because they miss you. They're coming back because they miss having access to you. And those are two completely different things. Here's what they're really questioning right now. And trust me, it's not just about you. They're questioning their own evolution or lack thereof. While you were transforming, what were they doing? Staying the same, recycling the same patterns, the same relationships, the same mistakes, the same conversations, the same life, and your transformation is holding up a mirror to their stagnation. And that reflection is unbearable. Because if you could change that drastically, what's their excuse? If you could heal that deeply, why are they still bleeding? If you could break those cycles, why are they still spinning? Your growth is proof that change is possible. And that proof invalidates every excuse they've been using to stay comfortable in their dysfunction. You're not just living your life anymore. You're exposing theirs. And that's a level of threat they never prepared for. Now, let's talk about the energy shift that happens when you walk into a room. Now, people feel it before they see you. There's a gravitational pull that didn't exist before. A magnetism that makes heads turn, not because you're trying, but because you're not. You move differently. You breathe differently. You exist differently. You're not performing confidence. You're exuding it. You're not faking peace. You're embodying it. And this energy, this new frequency, it's not something you can fake or force or manufacture. It's the byproduct of real internal work, of real healing, of real shedding, of real becoming. And people who are still stuck in performance mode, still stuck in pretending, they can smell the authenticity on you like it's a threat to their facade. They can feel that you're no longer playing the game they're still trapped in. And that realization makes them simultaneously attracted to you and terrified of you. Let's address what they're saying behind your back, because we both know they're talking. They think they're better than us now. They say they changed and forgot where they came from. They claim success changed them. They whisper. And here's what you need to understand about these statements. They're all projections. They're not describing you. They're describing their insecurities. Because in their minds, growth equals betrayal. Evolution equals abandonment. Transformation equals arrogance. They can't conceive of someone changing for themselves without it being a statement about everyone else. So when you show up different, they take it personally. They take it as judgment. They take it as rejection. And maybe, just maybe, they're not entirely wrong. Because your growth did reject something. It rejected their limitations, their expectations, their attempt to keep you in a box. And that rejection, that refusal to stay digestible and controllable, that's what they call arrogance, when really it's just autonomy. Here's a question for you. Do you even recognize who you used to be? Because I guarantee you, the person who started this journey, the person who existed before the silence, before the shedding, before the awakening, that person is unrecognizable now. Not because you're pretending to be someone you're not, but because you stopped pretending to be someone you weren't. You peeled back every layer that wasn't authentically yours, every belief that was implanted, every behavior that was conditioned, every response that was programmed. What's left isn't a new you. It's the real you. The uncorrupted version that existed before the world told you who to be. And this version, this raw, unfiltered, unapologetic version, this is what they're seeing now. This is what's making them question everything, because they realize they never actually knew you. They knew the performance, the mask, the version you presented to survive their judgment. And now that the mask is off, they're meeting you for the first time. And they're not prepared for how powerful that introduction feels. Now, let's get into the practical ways this transformation is manifesting in your daily life. You're saying no without guilt. You're choosing yourself without apology. You're setting boundaries without explanation. You're walking away from situations that don't serve you without looking back. You're investing in yourself without asking permission. You're celebrating your wins without dimming them for others' comfort. You're acknowledging your worth without waiting for external validation. Every single one of these actions is a revolution in a world that taught you to shrink, to settle, to sacrifice, to suffer silently. And each time you exercise this new autonomy, you're not just changing your life, you're rewriting the entire narrative of what's possible for people who've been where you've been. Here's what they didn't count on. That you'd find yourself in the darkness they thought would destroy you. They assumed isolation would break you, that silence would suffocate you, that absence would erase you. But instead, in that darkness, in that silence, in that absence, you met yourself for the first time without their interference, their input, their influence. And that meeting, that introduction to your authentic self changed everything. Because once you know who you really are, once you taste real peace, real power, real alignment, you can never go back to pretending. You can never unsee what you've seen, unlearn what you've learned, unf what you've felt. You're ruined for superficiality now, ruined for performance, ruined for settling. And that ruins their plans to ever control you again. Let's talk about the specific moment they realized they lost you. Maybe it was when you stopped responding with the urgency they were used to. Maybe it was when you stopped explaining yourself in ways they could dissect. Maybe it was when you stopped showing up to battles they tried to start. Maybe it was when you stopped caring about their opinion, their judgment, their narrative. Whatever the moment was, they felt it. They felt the shift. They felt the door close. And that feeling, that realization that they no longer have access, that they no longer have influence, that they no longer matter in your world the way they thought they did. That's what's driving them insane. Because people who are used to having power over you don't know how to exist when that power is revoked. They don't know how to process being irrelevant in your story after being so central for so long. And here's the beautiful irony. They're now the ones under the microscope. They're the ones being studied, analyzed, dissected by their own guilt, their own regret, their own what-ifs. While you were under their scrutiny, they felt powerful, superior, righteous. But now that the roles have reversed, now that they're the ones being examined by the life you're living without them, they can't handle it. They can't handle being the cautionary tale in someone else's redemption story. They can't handle being the chapter you had to close to start the good part. They can't handle being the lesson instead of the teacher. And that reversal, that complete inversion of the power dynamic, that's the real transformation they're witnessing. Not just that you changed, but that you changed so much that their entire framework for understanding you became obsolete. Now, let's address the fake concern they're suddenly showing. I'm worried about you, they say. You don't seem like yourself, they claim. I hope you're okay. They text. And all of this translates to one thing. I'm uncomfortable with how little control I have over you. Now, their concern isn't care. It's surveillance. They want information, access, insight into what you're doing, how you're doing it, who you're doing it with. They want to find the flaw, the crack, the weakness, anything that confirms their narrative that this transformation is temporary, artificial, unsustainable. But you're not giving them anything. You're not explaining, you're not defending, you're not performing your healing for their comfort. And that refusal, that decision to keep your peace private and your process protected, that's driving them absolutely mad. Here's what's happening chemically in their brains right now. Cognitive dissonance. The person they see now doesn't match the person they remember. And their brain is working overtime to make sense of that discrepancy. Option 1, accept that you've genuinely changed and they were wrong about you. Option 2, convince themselves that this change is fake and they were right all along. Guess which option their ego is choosing? That's right, option 2. Because option 1 requires humility, self-reflection, accountability, things they're not equipped for. So, they'll twist themselves into mental pretzels trying to discredit your growth rather than just admitting they underestimated you. And honestly, let them exhaust themselves building cases against your authenticity. Meanwhile, you'll be busy actually living authentically. And that contrast will speak louder than any defense you could offer. Now, let's talk about the people who are genuinely happy for you versus the ones who are pretending. You can feel the difference, can't you? The real ones, the ones who actually see you and celebrate you. Their energy feels light, supportive, warm. They ask questions out of genuine curiosity, not interrogation. They celebrate your wins without immediately pivoting to their own struggles. They give you space to be different, without needing to understand every detail of how you got there. But the fake ones, the ones who are threatened by your transformation, their energy feels heavy, probing, conditional. They compliment you, but there's a question mark at the end.